Gate 16, JFK International Airport, Monday morning. The rhythm of life here always starts early, steady, almost mechanical. People scramble to check their tickets, make last-minute calls to loved ones, sip on coffee, and scroll through their phones while waiting to board. Overhead, the announcement system hums steadily, blending with the rolling of suitcase wheels and the soft drip of espresso machines nearby. Amid the morning rush, one man sits silently in the priority waiting area, and he doesn't quite blend in. A crisp white shirt with not a single wrinkle, neatly pressed black, slack soft leather shoes, and a modest watch resting on his left wrist. No designer luggage, no assistant, no frantic scrolling on a phone. He just sits there, back straight, hands loosely clasped over his knees, eyes calm and steady, as if he's waiting for something but maybe not the flight. His name is Elijah Brooks, 48 years old, entrepreneur, investor, chairman of Brooktech Holdings, one of the top private equity firms in the United States. More importantly, he owns 23% of Horizon Air, the airline he's about to fly with. But no one around him knows that. To the casual eye, he's just a middle-aged black man sitting alone. No signs of wealth, no signature luxury briefcase, no bustling entourage, no flashy demeanor. To those walking past, Elijah looks like a slightly overdressed economy passenger. A few seats away, a middle-aged couple is whispering. The woman glances around and says quietly, "I heard someone from Brooktech is on this flight." "Really? Why would someone like that fly on a domestic commercial route?" The man shrugs. "Maybe it's some sort of inspection trip. I heard he's really private. Rarely appears in the media." They scan the lounge trying to guess who the mysterious big shot might be. Their eyes pause on Elijah for a split second, then move on. Not him, they think. He doesn't look like a billionaire CEO. Maybe it's that white guy in the corner typing away on his MacBook, or the one in Prada glasses with the Rolex. Elijah doesn't notice them. His eyes are on the overhead departure screen. Chai 9 JFK, San Francisco. On-time departure 08:15. Still nearly an hour to go. He closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them, his gaze is sharp, like someone who constantly observes, remembers, and evaluates every detail. At the reception desk, a staff member plugs in a USB to update the boarding system. More passengers trickle in, the sound of boarding passes being shuffled. A child nearby asks his mom if the plane will be late. All of this is familiar to Elijah. He's flown over 300 flights in the past 5 years, but today he's flying alone. No team, no assistant, no advance notice. And that decision, seemingly small, will accidentally trigger a chain of events he never anticipated. Group 1 and passengers needing assistance, please prepare for boarding. The announcement plays overhead. A few people rise from their seats. Elijah stays seated, no rush. He looks like a man with time, as if he prefers to let the crowd go first. In the distance, a freelance journalist named Jenna Ortiz is filming the busy terminal on her phone. She pans across a few passengers in line, then briefly lingers on Elijah. Something about him makes her pause. A stillness in his eyes, a quiet presence. But she keeps recording and moves on. What no one realizes, what not even Jenna suspects, is that the man in the white shirt, the one who's moments away from being asked to leave first class because he doesn't look like a VIP, is the second largest shareholder of the entire airline. And in just 45 minutes, his quiet presence will send shockwaves through the very system that failed to recognize him. The announcement echoed once again. "We now invite first-class passengers and Diamond members to board." Elijah Brooks rose slowly from his seat. The crisp white shirt stretched lightly across his shoulders as he moved. His posture was tall, composed, commanding, but never showy. He slung a backpack over his left shoulder phone, in his right hand screen off. No one looked his way. To most passengers eagerly lining up, he was just another traveler. Elijah walked calmly toward the boarding gate. A young flight attendant greeted passengers with a practiced smile. But standing directly at the first-class cabin door was someone else. Cassandra Lee, the lead flight attendant for flight HA 918. She stood upright, tablet in hand, checking each guest as they entered. As Elijah stepped forward, Cassandra looked up. Her eyes paused on his face for a brief second, then scanned down to his simple outfit. She glanced at the modest backpack on his shoulder, then at the digital boarding pass in his hand. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. "Excuse me, sir," Cassandra said, her tone polite but firm. "First class is at the front. Economy passengers, please board to the right." Elijah paused. He didn't respond right away. He simply held out his phone for her to see. On the screen, a digital boarding pass clearly read, "Passenger Elijah Brooks Flight HA 918, Seat 1A, First Class, Diamond Priority." Cassandra glanced at the screen, then back at him, then back to her tablet. She pressed her lips together. "This ticket, do you have ID?" she asked, voice quieter now, but still laced with suspicion. Without a word, Elijah pulled out his wallet and handed her both his government-issued ID and his Diamond Priority membership card, a level, reserved for only the top 0.1% of Horizon Air passengers. Cassandra took them, scanned them quickly, yet didn't move aside. A small line had begun to form behind him. Someone muttered, "What's going on? Why aren't they letting him board?" Another voice whispered, "He probably tried to sneak into first class." Elijah remained perfectly still. No argument, no frustration, only a patient, almost eerie calm like someone who had been through this before. Cassandra tapped a few buttons on her tablet, then furrowed her brow. She spoke louder this time. "The ticket says seat 1A, but the system shows him assigned to economy. This could be a glitch or an unconfirmed upgrade." People nearby began to glance over, some with curiosity, others with discomfort. A young boy pointed and asked his mother, "Is that man lost?" His mom quickly pulled him aside, whispering something, before leading him away. Elijah exhaled gently. "I booked first class 3 weeks ago," he said calmly. "There may be a system error. I suggest checking by confirmation code. Sriyam." He extended his phone with additional reservation details. Cassandra took the phone but kept her tone guarded. "Yes, just a moment, please." She turned to speak with another flight attendant stationed further back. Inside the first-class cabin, a white-haired older man already seated in seat 2A looked up from his drink. Clearly someone of corporate stature. He leaned back and said loudly, "Hey, buddy, maybe you booked the wrong class. I fly first all the time with Horizon, never seen someone traveling alone, no suitcase sitting in row 1. There was no malice in his tone, just quiet judgment. Elijah turned toward him without speaking. He met the man's gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Eyes steady, not angry, just cold and deep, like a frozen lake. Behind them, a young woman was quietly recording the whole thing. Jenna Ortiz, freelance journalist, originally just filming a travel vlog, now fully invested in this unfolding story. Cassandra returned, looking slightly flustered. "I'll contact the ground staff to verify," she said quickly. "In the meantime, sir, please step aside so other passengers can board." Elijah nodded and calmly stepped back, resting lightly against the cabin wall. No protest, no scene. But just then his phone buzzed. A message from Camilla Brooks, his daughter, and the head of strategic investments at Brook Tech. "Dad, are you being held at the gate? The shareholder alert system just flagged a disruption. I'm contacting Horizon's oversight team now." Elijah looked down at the message and let out the faintest smile. No one on this flight knew that when a man who owns 23% of the airline gets denied access to first class just because he doesn't look the part, that small mistake was about to spiral into a full-blown global PR crisis. Elijah Brooks stood calmly leaning against the cabin wall, his phone screen dark and resting quietly in his palm. He didn't lift his head. He didn't need to. He could feel it. Every eye in the cabin was on him. The airplane buzzed with its usual pre-flight chatter, but the air around Elijah felt different. Colder, heavier, tighter. No one said anything outright. No one asked questions out loud. But the whispers, the sideways glances, they rang louder than any announcement. "Must have mixed up his seat. Some folks always try to sneak into first class. He doesn't look like a VIP at all. Honestly, he looks more like he belongs in coach." No one knew who he was. All they saw was a black man in a white shirt, no luggage, no visible luxury, no flashy presence. And to them, that was enough. But Elijah didn't flinch. After more than 2 decades leading a powerful investment firm, he was no stranger to being underestimated. He'd walked into boardrooms full of white men in tailored suits, been mistaken for a driver at 5-star hotels, turned away at restaurants because he wasn't dressed appropriately. He had seen it all, and had learned to face it with quiet, composed stillness. But today, something felt different. Across the cabin, Jenna Ortiz, the freelance journalist, was still filming. She had started recording out of frustration with poor service. But the moment Elijah was asked to step aside, and then treated like a suspicious passenger, something in her stirred. "He already showed his boarding pass," she muttered, camera still focused, as Elijah stood calmly at the side. A young man in seat 4C whispered to his girlfriend, "If this ends up online, this airline is toast." She nodded, eyes fixed on the scene. "Look how they're treating him, like he's some kind of criminal." Up front, Cassandra Lee continued speaking into her earpiece, updating the ground team. Her eyes flicked toward Elijah, subtle, sharp, impatient, as if he was wasting her time. Another flight attendant leaned in and whispered something. Cassandra nodded. Then, perhaps to assert her sense of control, she turned back to Elijah and declared, "We'll need more time to verify your status. In the meantime, Mr. Brooks, I'll need you to exit the cabin so we can continue boarding." The first-class cabin fell silent. Phones began to rise. Some passengers recorded. Others just watched. Everyone understood. This was no longer about a seat. It was about dignity, justice, and the danger of judging someone by appearance alone. Still, Elijah didn't argue. He nodded quietly, turned, and walked out, each step on the carpet steady and deliberate. Behind him, the man in seat 2A shrugged smugly, as if the situation had resolved itself. Someone else let out a quiet sigh. Near the aircraft door, 2 airport security officers had arrived. One officer, Jackson, was tall, imposing with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor. Next to him, a young female officer, Lisa Clark, had just joined him. Cassandra approached, pointing toward Elijah. Her voice was confident, too confident. "This passenger is refusing to leave first class, despite not having a valid seat." Elijah calmly held out his phone and ID again. Officer Jackson reviewed them closely. His eyes narrowed, but not with suspicion, with realization. There was something about Elijah's composure that didn't match the story being told. "Mr. Brooks, would you mind stepping outside with us for a moment while we verify some information?" Jackson's tone was far more respectful than Cassandra's. Elijah nodded. "I don't mind, but I do request that all verification be documented. It appears many bystanders are already doing that." He glanced toward Jenna, who was still recording, and now several other passengers had their phones up too. Jenna whispered under her breath, "If this goes live, it'll spread faster than mainstream news." She tapped open Twitter and typed, "Black man with first-class boarding pass being removed from Horizon Air Flight HA918 despite proper ID and status. The Horizon discrimination? Post, 10 seconds later, 12 likes, 1 minute 47, 2 minutes over 300. The hashtag was starting to trend. Meanwhile, Elijah stepped out of the cabin, head held high, back straight, eyes steady. He didn't know, or maybe he knew all too well, that in less than 45 minutes the entire executive team, PR division, and crisis management board of Horizon Air would be scrambling. All because of one man, in a white shirt, who didn't look the part, but owned nearly a quarter of the airline. The first-class cabin door closed quietly behind Elijah Brooks. As he stepped out, the 2 security officers led him to a seat near the boarding gate. His posture remained upright, chin slightly raised. There was no anger on his face, no confusion, only a calmness so absolute it made even Officer Jackson hesitate. Behind them, Jenna Ortiz was still live streaming. In under 5 minutes, her viewership had surged past 800 viewers. The comments rolled in. "What's going on? He already showed his boarding pass. This is discrimination. Get a lawyer now." Inside the plane, the mood had shifted. Several passengers began questioning the crew. Some demanded an explanation as to why Mr. Brooks was asked to leave, while others, especially those in first class, looked visibly uncomfortable and unsettled. Lead flight attendant Cassandra Lee was under pressure. She made her way into the cockpit to speak with Captain Derek Mills, a veteran pilot with 15 years at Horizon Air, who had just received word of a disruptive passenger. "He refused to leave first class despite not having a valid ticket," Cassandra said, her voice tense. Mills frowned. "Did you verify his credentials properly?" "There's a chance it's a fake ticket or an unapproved upgrade. The system doesn't show seat 1A under that name," she replied. "Call ground operations," Mills said firmly. If this isn't resolved in 10 minutes, we'll have to delay takeoff. If needed, we'll ask security to remove him. At the boarding gate, a Horizon staffer was already on the phone with operations. On the internal monitor, an orange alert flashed. Passenger dispute, first-class flight, HA918. Media alert, multiple passengers recording. Within just 15 minutes, Horizon Air's internal systems flagged the hashtag Horizon Discrimination as trending on Twitter. The PR department sent out a priority warning to operations to investigate immediately. But at a higher level, an even more urgent alert appeared: priority shareholder signal, Brooktech Holdings, emergency flag involving strategic tier passenger. Cassandra still didn't know that. Outside officer Lisa Clark had just finished connecting with customer verification services. She turned to Jackson and spoke quietly. Records confirm that Mr. Brooks holds a valid first-class ticket seat 1 with a confirmed reservation. Jackson furrowed his brow. So why doesn't the onboard system reflect that? Could be a sync error or someone tampered with the entry data, Lisa murmured. But his ID, diamond status card, and boarding pass all check out. Jackson turned to Elijah. Mr. Brooks, the system now confirms you're fully entitled to seat 1A. Would you like me to escort you back to the cabin? Elijah shook his head calmly. No need. Everything will become clear in just a few minutes. All I ask is that everything be properly documented. I'm not here to cause trouble, just to observe. Just then, Cassandra's phone rang. The call was from Janet Williams, a senior supervisor with Horizon Air at JFK. Janet's voice was tight. Cassandra, I just received a flag from the shareholder office. The passenger you asked to leave is Elijah Brooks. Cassandra froze. Janet continued, Brooks is the chairman of Brooktech Holdings, the firm that currently holds 23% equity in Horizon Air, and he's in the correct seat. There was a long, heavy pause. I didn't know, Cassandra stammered. It's not about what you knew, Janet snapped. It's about the fact this is being live-streamed, and our communications team is fighting a full-blown PR storm right now. Meanwhile, Camilla Brooks, Elijah's daughter, had triggered Level 1 crisis protocol at Brooktech. This meant every team connected to Horizon Air Investments was ordered to reevaluate the airline's entire strategic alignment. Back at Gate 16, Jenna updated her viewers. Breaking update. The man in this video is Elijah Brooks, chairman of Brooktech Holdings and a major shareholder of this very airline. And they kicked him out of first class for suspicious ticket issues. The live stream viewer count shot past 3,000. On Twitter, your Horizon Discrimination climbed to top 3 trending in the region. Cassandra felt her face flush hot. Her hand trembled slightly. Things were spinning out of control. And the worst part, Elijah Brooks hadn't said a single word to the media. He was simply waiting for the right moment. Still seated neatly beside the boarding gate, Elijah Brooks glanced at his watch, 08:02 a.m. Flight HA918 was scheduled for departure at 08:15, but passengers were still unsettled. Flight attendants, visibly flustered, and security officers stood motionless, as if waiting for a command. The phone in Elijah's hand vibrated gently. The screen lit up with a name, Camilla Brooks. He answered. You're being held back, aren't you? Camilla's voice was sharp and precise, someone seasoned in handling crises. It's nothing serious, Elijah said calmly. Just a bit of the usual prejudice. Though this time, it comes with a live stream. Camilla exhaled. Do you want me to intervene? Elijah paused. His eyes flicked across the gate area, where Cassandra still whispered to her colleague, and Officer Jackson maintained a respectful distance. No personal intervention, he replied, but go ahead and activate Shareholder Protocol Level 1 with Horizon. Follow the procedure. Camilla didn't need clarification. As Elijah's only daughter and Brooktech's senior strategic director, she understood him instantly. Understood, she said. I'll send the urgent escalation to the investment committee. They'll convene within 15 minutes. Do you need anything else? Elijah's tone deepened. Just stick to the process. No divestment, not yet. But if Horizon fails to respond appropriately within the next 30 minutes, you know what to do. Understood, Camilla repeated. And you still staying silent publicly? Elijah smiled slightly. For now, yes. The call ended. Elijah looked around again. Across the boarding area, more and more people were now recording with their phones. Jenna Ortiz, still live streaming, had just received confirmation from one of her viewers that Brooktech Holdings was convening an emergency internal meeting. That update rippled across social media. A new tweet began gaining traction. If you owned 23% of an airline and got removed from first class because you didn't look the part, what would you do? A Horizon crisis jarred Elijah Brooks, each shark Brooktech. Nearly 2,000 kilometers away at Horizon Air headquarters, a priority-level email tagged "Red" flashed across the screen of Maxwell Hunt, the airline's CEO. Subject: Priority Shareholder Alert. Passenger Elijah Brooks. Flight HA98. Beneath it, a brief note from the Shareholder Relations Office. Brooktech Holdings confirms Elijah Brooks is facing a discrimination incident on Flight HA918. The incident is being filmed and is spreading on social media. Immediate response recommended. Suggest convening a temporary strategic board meeting. Maxwell didn't need to read further. He muttered under his breath, "Oh my God, Brooks." He immediately dialed Janet Williams, JFK's senior airport supervisor. Janet was just about to enter the boarding area when her phone rang. Seeing Maxwell's name, she froze. "Janet!" Maxwell began without pleasantries. "What the hell is going on at gate 16? Sir?" Janet swallowed hard. "I just found out 15 minutes ago. There was a misunderstanding with a passenger, Elijah Brooks. The lead flight attendant didn't recognize him." "Didn't recognize him?" Maxwell's voice was sharp. "He was the one who funded over a quarter of our restructuring capital last year. Do you know what rights a priority level 1 shareholder has?" Yes, sir." Janet tried to steady herself. "I'm on my way there. I'll handle it." "No, you won't handle it," Maxwell snapped. "You will apologize in person if Mr. Brooks asks for it. And if this escalates, we won't just lose a shareholder. We'll lose market trust." Janet took a deep breath. "Understood." She hung up and moved quickly toward gate 16. Inside, Officer Jackson had just received legal confirmation from Horizon's compliance department. Elijah Brooks is not only fully verified, but may also be eligible for honorary passenger designation. Jenna Ortiz, still recording, raised her phone higher as she spotted Janet approaching. Elijah turned and saw her coming. Her expression taut eyes, trying to remain composed. "Mr. Brooks," Janet began, voice controlled. "I'm Janet Williams, airport supervisor for Horizon here at JFK. First, allow me to extend our deepest apologies for the inconvenience you've experienced." Elijah gave her a slight nod. He didn't say a word, but his eyes made something very clear. He had now shifted from excluded passenger to the man the entire airline was scrambling to appease. And outside that cabin, the live stream viewership hit 5,200. Then Jenna said just one sentence, one that ignited everything further. "We've just witnessed the moment when silent power finally spoke." Although Janet Williams, the airport's senior supervisor, had personally apologized to Elijah Brooks, it was clear the ordeal wasn't over yet. Flight HA918 was now less than 10 minutes from its scheduled departure. Passengers were growing anxious. Some began voicing concerns about the delay, while others remained silent but fixated on the scene unfolding before them. Inside the cockpit, Captain Derek Mills received word from the crew. The man in question is Elijah Brooks, the airline's major shareholder. But rather than coming out to assess the situation himself, he responded curtly over the intercom. "I don't care who he is. If he's disrupting boarding procedures, we still have the right to deny transport." A nearby flight attendant overheard the comment. She said nothing but didn't forget it. Outside the aircraft door, Elijah sat quietly. Janet stood nearby, awaiting a final clearance call from the operations center. Suddenly, Cassandra Lee, the lead flight attendant, who had doubted Elijah from the very start, approached with an internal flight manifest in hand. She still wore the same rigid skepticism. "Mr. Brooks," she began, speaking in the presence of Janet and both security officers. "I've just received a follow-up. Your ticket might be real, but the system still hasn't confirmed the payment source." Janet turned to Cassandra, frowning. "What are you talking about? I just got direct instructions from the shareholder office." Cassandra nodded but pressed on. "The thing is, he showed a digital boarding pass, a valid ID, and a diamond priority card, but those things can be faked. People can replicate anything online these days. I've seen similar cases before. Elijah remained silent, but Janet began to lose her patience. Cassandra, Mr. Brooks is a major shareholder. We have no legal basis to detain him further, unless instructed directly from headquarters. Still, Cassandra refused to back down. I'm just following protocol, she said, straining to maintain her composure. At that moment, Officer Jackson stepped forward holding a printed verification report from airport security. Mr. Brooks' information has been fully vetted and confirmed. Ticket purchased 21 days ago via Brooktech Holdings corporate account. First class, seat 1A, diamond priority, all records match, no signs of forgery. Cassandra froze speechless for a few seconds, then said weakly, maybe the system glitched. I just thought he might. That's when Elijah finally spoke. His voice was low, even and calm. I don't blame you for being cautious, but I wonder if I were a white man wearing a suit, carrying a Toomey briefcase, and speaking with a Wall Street accent. Would you have asked me to step out of the cabin for further verification? No one replied. Janet lowered her gaze. Jackson sighed. Cassandra stood frozen in place. A few long seconds of silence passed. Jenna Ortiz, still live streaming, captured the entire moment. On social media, the comments exploded. He showed every document and still wasn't believed. Discrimination doesn't always shout, it whispers in glances and baseless suspicion. This flight attendant is sinking her own airline with nothing but bias. Cassandra opened her mouth, but Janet cut in first. Thank you, Cassandra. I'll handle things from here. Please return to the cabin and assist the other passengers. Her tone had changed, no longer polite. It was direct and firm. Cassandra nodded and walked away, but her steps were noticeably unsteady. Elijah stood and adjusted the collar of his white shirt. He didn't look back. He simply turned to Jackson and said, Thank you for doing your job. That's all I ever needed. Jackson nodded. It was an honor, Mr. Brooks. Just then, Janet's phone rang again. It was headquarters. She answered, listened, then responded. Yes, I'm with him now. Understood. I'll take care of it. She hung up and looked at Elijah. You may return to the cabin at any time. We're assigning a different flight crew to complete the boarding process. Adjustments are being made. Elijah raised an eyebrow. For me, Janet nodded. Not just for you, for the entire system that's watching our every move right now. He gave a faint nod, nothing more. Behind them, the loudspeaker came on. Flight HA918 will be delayed by 20 minutes due to internal procedural adjustments. We appreciate your understanding. Inside the aircraft, passengers began murmuring again, this time about something else entirely. Who is that guy? I heard he owns part of the airline. Seriously, and they tried to throw him off. What had started with a glance of doubt had become a vivid lesson in how easy it is to misjudge someone based on nothing but bias. And Elijah Brooks, the quiet man in the crisp white shirt, had just given an entire system its first lesson in what would soon become a transformation across the industry. Elijah Brooks returned to the boarding gate with a calm, measured stride. No hurry, no tension. His white shirt remained crisp, untouched by insult. His face showed no emotion, but the silence surrounding him was louder than any outcry. Jenna Ortiz, the freelance journalist, was still filming, now live streaming on both Twitter and TikTok. Her caption read simply, Black CEO removed from first class despite valid ticket. This is why NAR Horizon discrimination is exploding. At the same time, a short clip Jenna had edited from her stream showing Cassandra questioning Elijah's payment source was going viral across civil rights forums, travel communities, and even investment groups. Within just 15 minutes, her live viewership crossed $12,000 with over 8,000 shares and hashtags like Shuck Elijah Brooks, Shuck Brooktech, Shuck Chuck Airline Bias, Shuck Chuck Horizon Crisis were rocketing up the national trending list on Twitter. At Gate 16, passengers from other nearby flights gathered to watch. Every eye turned toward the boarding area, toward the black man who had been subjected to layers of unnecessary scrutiny simply because he didn't look like someone who belonged in first class. A college student live streaming nearby said loudly to thousands of followers, "The whole airport is buzzing about this. A man in a white shirt, calm, fully credentialed, with valid ID and a diamond membership, and they still kicked him off the plane. just because they didn't believe he could be someone important. A businessman close by recorded his own video posting directly to LinkedIn. If you're a brand, the last thing you want is to insult your largest shareholder in front of hundreds of passengers live streaming it. Meanwhile, inside the crisis operations room at Horizon Air, HQ red alerts began flashing across their digital media dashboard. Keyword Horizon discrimination, up 300% in 15 minutes. Jenna Ortiz's original clip cited by 4 major digital news outlets. Horizon stock slipping 1.4% in after-hours trading. Legal, PR, and shareholder relations were all in emergency meetings. But everyone was waiting for one thing: a public response from Elijah Brooks, who so far had said nothing to the press. And somehow that silence made the world even more curious. Back at Gate 16, Janet Williams struggled to redirect passenger flow. But no one cared about boarding anymore. Many flat out refused to get on the plane until the situation was made right. An older passenger said aloud, "I'm not stepping foot on that flight until he receives a public apology." A middle-aged woman added, "I saw everything from the beginning. He wasn't being difficult. The one in the wrong was the flight attendant, not the passenger." Even the flight crew felt the tension. A younger attendant quietly approached Janet and whispered, "We don't want to continue this flight if he's still being treated like a problem." Janet now understood this had moved far beyond the scope of standard airport procedure. This wasn't just a passenger incident. This was a full-blown crisis of trust. Passengers, press, and the public were all watching closely. And then came the second media explosion. The official Twitter account of BrookTech Holdings posted a brief but seismic statement. BrookTech Holdings is aware of the incident involving Chairman Elijah Brooks aboard Flight HA918. We are conducting a full reassessment of our investment relationship with Horizon Air. Our highest values are respect, equality, and justice for all. The tweet detonated across social media. Financial media outlets quickly picked up the story. BrookTech may withdraw funding from Horizon Air, and the markets trembled. Inside the cabin, Captain Derek Mills received a direct call from HQ, but this time it wasn't a request, it was an order. Immediately relinquish command of the flight. Another captain is en route and will assume control within 30 minutes. You are temporarily suspended. Mills was stunned. He didn't even have time to respond before the backup crew entered the cockpit. Outside, Elijah remained near the boarding door. He looked around at the very people who had once doubted him, dismissed him. Now many lowered their gaze or even stood in silent support. He didn't need to say a word. His silence under thousands of eyes and dozens of cameras was a louder indictment than any spoken accusation. And as Jenna Ortiz wrapped up the first part of her viral stream, she said a single sentence: "We just witnessed a system collapse, not from shouting, but from a man in a white shirt who stood tall and refused to be silent any longer." The atmosphere at Gate 16 had completely transformed. What began as quiet frustration had escalated into public outrage. Airport staff avoided cameras. Most of the original flight crew had quietly stepped away. Other flights were now delayed as crowds gathered to witness what many were calling the biggest incident at JFK this morning. At the center of it all stood Elijah Brooks, still calm, silent beside Janet Williams, the airport supervisor. Although Janet had just received a direct mandate from Horizon Air's headquarters to fully cooperate, she still didn't quite grasp who Elijah Brooks truly was. She would soon find out. Not because Elijah raised his voice, but because he quietly opened his wallet and pulled out a business card. It was matte black, smooth understated. Etched in silver foil was a single name and title: Elijah J. Brooks, Chairman and CEO. BrookTech Holdings Priority Level 1 Shareholder. Horizon Air. Janet froze. She held the card in both hands as if it were a classified document. At the bottom, a small but unmistakable line was printed: 23.1% equity, Horizon Air Internal Oversight Council. She looked up at Elijah, stunned. "You're—" Elijah smiled for the first time since entering the airport that morning. "I'm the person your system has spent the last hour trying to push off this flight." His voice wasn't raised. He wasn't angry, but every word dropped into the tension-filled air like a stone into still water. At that exact moment, Jenna Ortiz moved closer, still live streaming. "Mr. Brooks," she asked cautiously, Would you like to make an official statement? Elijah looked into the camera. No, he said. I don't feel the need to prove who I am. But if you're curious, ask Horizon Air System. They know. A gasp rose from the crowd. Then applause. Not because he was a CEO, but because he had remained composed all the way through. Officer Jackson approached and bowed his head respectfully. Mr. Brooks, he said, would you like us to summon a senior executive from Horizon to meet you here directly? Elijah checked his watch. In 10 minutes, he replied, they'll come to me on their own. Trust me. Not far away inside Horizon Air headquarters, CEO Maxwell Hunt had just finished an emergency meeting with legal and shareholder relations. His nerves were fraying. He hasn't made a public statement yet, a staffer said, but the live stream is now being picked up by CNBC and Bloomberg. If he announces a divestment, our stock could tank before the afternoon bell. Maxwell clenched his phone. Get me Janet Williams, now. A minute later, Janet answered. Janet. Maxwell's voice came fast. Is Brooks still at gate 16? Yes, sir. He just handed me his business card. I can confirm. Don't confirm with me. Maxwell cut her off. Put him on the phone. I need to speak to him directly. Janet handed the phone to Elijah. He pressed it calmly to his ear. Elijah Brooks speaking. A pause. Then Maxwell's voice steadying itself. Elijah, this is Maxwell Hunt. Please accept our deepest apologies for this morning. This was a situation we never saw coming. Elijah's voice was quiet but sharp. Never saw coming or never had a system in place to confront discrimination when it actually happens. We're addressing it now, I promise. The involved crew has been suspended, and I'll fly to New York myself this afternoon if needed. Elijah glanced at Jenna, then at the hundreds of passengers watching in silence. Then he spoke into the phone. Maxwell, I don't need promises, I need action, and I'll be sharing my expectations, not just with you, but with every shareholder, every customer, and the entire airline industry. You're going public with this, Maxwell asked. Not going to, Elijah replied. I already am. He ended the call. Jenna stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly. Mr. Brooks, are you preparing to make a public statement? Elijah nodded. And it won't just be about me, he said, his voice clear and unwavering. It'll be about the thousands of passengers who've been treated as if they didn't belong, just because they didn't fit someone's idea of who belongs in first class. He looked directly into the camera. It's time. The system changed. At Horizon Air's headquarters in Chicago, less than 10 minutes after the phone call with Elijah Brooks, an emergency meeting was convened on the 21st floor, in the Blue Summit Conference Room, a space reserved exclusively for board-level discussions. Maxwell Hunt, CEO of Horizon Air, entered with a tense face. His suit jacket was still on tie, loosened shoulders tight. Behind him trailed 3 legal advisors, 2 shareholder relations officers, and the crisis PR lead. At the center of the room, a projector displayed a real-time analytics dashboard. Hashtag Chucker Horizon Discrimination had surpassed 2.7 million interactions in just 3 hours. Jenna Ortiz's video had been replayed on CNN, NBC, and Al Jazeera. Brooktech Holdings was now in position to demand a special shareholder meeting within 24 hours. Horizon stock had dropped 3.2% in pre-market trading and was still falling. Maxwell took the seat at the head of the table and tapped his fingers on the surface. Give me the preliminary damage assessment, he said, his voice low but sharp. Sharon Lim, Director of Internal Communications, spoke first. This is worse than any previous media crisis we've faced. What happened with Mr. Brooks isn't just a case of discrimination. It's a breach of trust from a strategic shareholder. Who exactly is Jenna Ortiz? Maxwell asked. She's a former investigative journalist for The Atlantic, known for covering racial equity and systemic injustice. Her Twitter account has over 500,000 followers. Another executive cut in. And now she's being watched by the investment community. Some analysts are already asking, if Horizon treats its largest shareholder this way, how are they treating regular customers? Maxwell rubbed his temples. Just hours ago, he'd been finalizing the launch of the Fly with Executives campaign, an initiative to attract more elite travelers. Now the entire concept risks collapsing over a single operational failure. I want a three-tier response plan. Sharon, do we have a draft statement ready? Sharon nodded. Yes, but it needs your final approval. It includes a public apology to Mr. Brooks, a commitment to internal investigation, and mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. Good, Maxwell said, but not enough. I want a live virtual press conference within 2 hours. Invite Mr. Brooks to attend, if he agrees. The room fell silent. Everyone knew inviting Elijah Brooks to a live press event was a double-edged sword. If he accepted and responded diplomatically, Horizon might salvage its reputation. But if he publicly condemned the airline, it could be the death sentence for the brand. One legal advisor hesitated, then spoke. Sir, if Mr. Brooks openly criticizes Horizon and implies that BrookTech will divest our strategic partnership agreement from last year mandates that we buy back their shares at preferred valuation, which means more than $1.4 billion in cash, we don't have that kind of liquidity right now. Maxwell nodded slowly. I know. He stood up and walked to the glass wall overlooking the heart of downtown Chicago. Outside, a Horizon airplane was taking off. Where it was headed, he didn't know. But at that moment, his company felt completely adrift in a storm. How many flights are operating under the Horizon brand today? He asked suddenly. 386, sir, including 91 premium class flights, a junior assistant replied. Maxwell turned around, eyes steely. Then remember this. If Elijah Brooks stands in front of a camera and says, I no longer trust Horizon, every single one of those 386 flights could lose passengers. Not next year, this week. No one spoke. No one even breathed too loud. Maxwell continued, get in touch with BrookTech immediately. I don't care where they are, New York, Tokyo, or London. Just deliver this message. The general counsel looked up. What message, sir? Maxwell replied slowly, every word deliberate. We don't just need Elijah Brooks' forgiveness. We need him to believe that Horizon deserves a second chance. 7:00 p.m. that same evening. The skies over Manhattan had darkened with thick cloud signs of a coming downpour. But for the media, the real storm was already gathering inside a small conference room at the Conrad, New York downtown, which had just been secured by Elijah Brooks for a last-minute press conference. There was no elaborate backdrop, no banners, no lawyers flanking him on either side. Just a single podium, soft lighting, and one microphone. Elijah Brooks entered the room precisely on time, wearing a light gray suit. Underneath the same crisp white shirt he'd worn during the entire ordeal at JFK. His face was calm as always, but there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, but the weight of truth. The room was completely silent. More than 400 journalists from major outlets, CNN, Reuters, Forbes, Bloomberg, the New York Times were in attendance. Outside on YouTube and Twitter, BrookTech Media's live stream had just crossed 230,000 live viewers. Elijah placed his hands on the podium, took a deep breath and began. I'm not here asking for sympathy. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for what happened to me this morning at JFK Airport. A brief silence. I'm here to tell you this. What happened to me is not an isolated incident. It has happened, it is happening, and it will continue to happen to thousands of people every day. The only difference today is that the person who was mistreated happened to carry a business card that forced people to listen. The click of a few cameras broke the silence, then faded again. I purchased a first-class ticket using my own company card. I provided every document, arrived on time, followed every rule. But because I didn't look like someone who belonged in first class, I was asked to prove myself again. I was detained. I was questioned. I was filmed like a threat. He looked up directly into the camera lens. If I, a man who owns more than 23% of Horizon Air, can be treated this way, what's happening to those without power, without cameras, without a microphone like this one? The room went still. Online comments began pouring into the live stream like a flood. He's right. The system is wired to judge people by appearances. This isn't a company issue anymore. It's a cultural reckoning. I work in an airport. I see this every day. I'm ashamed. Elijah continued. I'm not here to declare war. I'm not asking for anyone to be fired. I'm asking for something much harder, real change. Not on posters, not in check-the-box training sessions, but in the way we see human value beyond skin color, beyond clothing, beyond invisible biases. He paused, then spoke slowly and clearly. I am still a shareholder in Horizon, but my trust in this system has been damaged, and I will not make any further investment decisions, not until I see evidence that people who look like me will never again be treated the way I was treated this morning. The room erupted in applause, at first hesitant, then rising in waves. It wasn't corporate politeness. It was the sound of people who had once been silent, now choosing to stand. Elijah bowed slightly, then left the podium. He took no questions from the press. He didn't need to. He had said everything that needed to be said. And it was that clarity, that truth, that made the media explode. That night, Elijah Brooks's name dominated headlines across every major news network. CNN, major airline shareholder, faces discrimination. His words are changing the game. Forbes, the man removed from first class, turns out to own nearly a quarter of the airline. Bloomberg, Brooktech may withdraw. Horizon faces unprecedented ethical and financial crisis. On social media, one quote from Elijah surged into global trending. I don't need privilege. I just need to be seen as human like everyone else. That night in a quiet hotel suite overlooking the Hudson River, Elijah sat alone. He wasn't watching the news. He wasn't refreshing the stock tickers. He just stared out at the water, knowing this was not just a media moment. This was the beginning of something bigger. And tomorrow, the real storm would begin. 600 Southern a.m. the following morning. While Brooktech Holdings headquarters in San Francisco was still blanketed in early morning fog, the lights were already on across the 42nd floor home to the firm's executive leadership suite. In the panoramic strategy room, Cynthia Ramirez, Brooktech's global chief strategy officer, was answering a direct call from none other than Elijah Brooks, the founder, chairman, and controlling shareholder of the firm. Cynthia, I need you to call an emergency meeting within the next 30 minutes. I want the full investment team, fund managers, and legal partners present. She paused only briefly, then replied, Understood, Mr. Brooks. Is this the next step in our response to Horizon? Elijah didn't answer immediately. He said only one sentence. Yesterday was the warning. Today is the action. 800 a.m. sharp. The high-level internal meeting began. At the center screen of the glass-walled boardroom was a real-time status dashboard. Horizon stock down 4.8% following Elijah's public remarks. Public sentiment in favor of Brooktech surged with strong signals from civil rights organizations. Investor interest in ESG-aligned funds managed by Brooktech rose 17% in just 12 hours. Elijah appeared via live stream from his private office in New York, dressed in a black suit. His expression was razor-sharp. His voice wasn't raised, but every word landed with precision. We can't just issue statements of concern and move on like nothing happened. Brooktech was built on a principle of zero tolerance for injustice. It's time we uphold it. Cynthia spoke next. We've prepared 3 strategic scenarios. 1, issue a formal ultimatum to Horizon Air, demanding policy reform and dismissal of those responsible. 2, freeze upcoming capital infusion and suspend dividend entitlements. 3, if no adequate response is given, invoke our early exit clause and begin divestment proceedings. Board member Ronald Yee, head of strategic growth, spoke cautiously. If we divest, Horizon will be required to repurchase our shares at a preferred rate well above current market value. Do they even have the liquidity to do that? Cynthia shook her head. No, and that's exactly why they'll have to negotiate. Confrontation is not in their interest. Elijah nodded slightly. I don't intend to drive them into bankruptcy, but they need to understand actions have consequences, and respect isn't a slogan, it's a standard. He paused. I want to issue an open letter, not just to Horizon, but to the entire aviation industry, and beyond, to any institution that believes it can judge people based on appearance. The letter was drafted, approved, and scheduled for release within the hour. Its tone was bold, direct, and deeply strategic. Brooktech Holdings will always stand on the side of justice. Any company that partners with us must reflect that value, not just on paper, but in practice. We don't invest in reputation. We invest in character and accountability. The letter ended with a declaration that sent shock waves through the market. Horizon Air has 7 days to submit a formal plan for systemic reform. If they fail to do so, Brooktech will initiate a full restructuring of our investment portfolio, beginning with the complete withdrawal of our 23.1% stake. 9:30 a.m. same day. The open letter was published on Brooktech's official website and distributed through major financial outlets like Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, and TechCrunch. Within the first hour, the statement received 1.2 million views, 8,000 comments largely positive, widespread endorsement from business ethicists, social justice advocates, and young investors. On Twitter, one quote from Elijah's letter went globally viral: "We don't invest in reputation, we invest in responsibility." At Horizon Air's corporate headquarters, the crisis alarm sounded again. Only this time, they weren't just facing a customer incident. They were facing a shareholder who had become a movement. Back in New York, Elijah ended the video call and quietly rose from his chair. He stepped to the window, gazing toward the airport, the place where everything had begun. He knew full well he wasn't just defending his dignity. He was using financial power, not to seek revenge, but to clear the runway for real, lasting change. 10:00 a.m. the next morning. At Horizon Air's headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. The open letter from Brooktech was now headlining every major media outlet. Reporters no longer described the incident as a case of individual discrimination. It had become a full-scale cultural crisis within corporate America. Horizon's stock continued its freefall. By market open, shares had dropped 6.5%, sparking fears among board members of a potential class action lawsuit from investors for failing to respond swiftly to a crisis that damaged shareholder value. Maxwell Hunt, once the confident CEO sitting atop the private aviation world, was now requesting a meeting with the very man they had once asked to leave the plane. An email was sent to Mr. Elijah Brooks of Maxwell Hunt on behalf of Horizon Air, respectfully request a direct and private meeting. The purpose is to renegotiate our strategic relationship, hear your feedback, and find a more sustainable path forward for both sides. Respectfully, Maxwell Hunt. Elijah read the message over breakfast at a boutique hotel in Lower Manhattan. After scanning it, he gave a small nod and turned to his assistant. They finally understand. 2:00 p.m. same day. A private meeting between Elijah Brooks and Maxwell Hunt took place in a neutral conference room in New York City. The press only knew the meeting had happened. No one was granted access. But within 2 hours, the media narrative had begun to shift. Horizon's official website published a surprising statement. Horizon Air offers a formal apology to Mr. Elijah Brooks and all passengers affected by the recent incident. We have begun personnel restructuring and internal policy review. Additionally, we are establishing an independent advisory board with Mr. Brooks serving as honorary chairman to oversee systemic reform efforts. The media responded instantly, but this time the wind had changed. Financial analysts commented, if Brooks returns to assist Horizon even symbolically, it would mark one of the most remarkable corporate turnarounds we've seen. A veteran New York Times columnist wrote, "It's rare to see someone publicly discriminated against, then come back to reshape the very company that did it." Social media erupted. He didn't retaliate, he stood firm, and the truth did the rest. This is how power should be used, not to crush systems, but to elevate them. I never followed Brooktech stock before. Starting today, I'm watching closely. Even Horizon's own employees began speaking up. A letter signed by 234 team members was submitted to corporate leadership. If Mr. Brooks agrees to join the reform board, we commit to driving real change. We want to be proud of saying we work at Horizon. From Brooktech's side, the message was clear and measured. Cynthia Ramirez, Chief Strategy Officer, told CNBC, "We haven't yet decided whether we'll maintain our stake. But what's clear is this Horizon has changed its tone, and that's the first step toward making it right." Elijah declined all personal interviews, but he issued a short statement through his spokesperson. "I'm not asking anyone to bow their heads. I'm asking them to look in the mirror." And so the man who was once doubted for not looking first class had become a symbol of clarity, conviction, and unshakable dignity. News outlets began calling him the quiet force that changed the system. A CEO who didn't need to prove power because power was in how he behaved. The embodiment of 21st century leadership. That afternoon, as the two men exited the meeting room, Maxwell Hunt extended his hand to Elijah Brooks in front of the waiting cameras. There was no distance, no arrogance, no suspicion. Only one simple truth remained. They once underestimated him because they didn't realize they were standing face to face with a game changer. June, 1 year after the JFK incident. In the skies above San Francisco, a Horizon Airjet soared across the bay, this time bearing a new logo, and just beneath it a name painted with purpose, Elijah Legacy Edition. The first aircraft ever named, not after rank or wealth, but after the impact of a living person. At Horizon Air's headquarters, CEO Maxwell Hunt was leading the company's annual press conference. But no one in the room cared about the quarterly numbers. They were waiting for the final announcement, the one that mattered most, the one honoring the man who had reshaped the company's future. Maxwell raised his eyes to the camera. Today marks 1 year since we were taught a hard but invaluable lesson. A year ago, we failed deeply in how we judged a person. And if not for the man who chose to stand his ground in silence and speak only when the moment mattered most, we wouldn't be here today. He held up a small box containing a titanium model of the commemorative plane, etched with the name Elijah Brooks. Meanwhile, far from the spotlight in a quiet wooden cabin nestled by the pine forests of northern Seattle, Elijah Brooks sat with his young niece reading her a story. No cameras, no breaking news. He didn't watch the press conference. He didn't need to. When his assistant handed him an iPad showing Horizon's tribute, he simply smiled. Not with pride, not with triumph, but with quiet peace, like everything had unfolded exactly as it should. "Aren't you going to say something, Uncle?" the little girl asked. Elijah turned a page and replied gently, "Not everyone who leads does it in front of a camera. Sometimes the quietest observer leaves the deepest mark." In the year that followed, the ripple effect went far beyond Horizon. Across the U.S. airline industry, real change began to take root. Major carriers launched blind boarding programs, assessing passengers by data, not by appearance. Several European airports introduced zones of respect priority areas, not for ticket class, but for those who had experienced past discrimination. Elite business schools like Wharton, Stanford, and Harvard adopted the Elijah Brooks case study in their courses on leadership and corporate ethics. No one had asked Elijah to do this. No one expected a quiet shareholder to become a moral compass for an entire industry. But he did not through force, but through character and conviction. Later that year, Brooktech Holdings announced it would retain its stake in Horizon after the airline scored 98 out of 100 on the equity index, a new corporate responsibility benchmark founded by Elijah's firm. As for Horizon, the company that once stood at the edge of collapse became the fastest-growing airline in its class. Customers who had turned away came back, not just for the service, but because they believed in the new culture, one born from a mistake, and redeemed through humility. On the 1-year anniversary, a small group of passengers gathered at Gate 16, the place where it all began. They weren't relatives of Elijah. They were simply witnesses, people who had seen the moment with their own eyes. Among them was Jenna Ortiz, the woman who had live-streamed the pivotal encounter. She stepped forward and said, "I used to think change only came from massive movements, but I was wrong. Real change begins when one person refuses to stay silent in the face of injustice." And that person was Elijah Brooks. And so in a world filled with noise, prejudice, and endless competition, a middle-aged black man in a white shirt once questioned simply for not looking wealthy left behind a legacy. Not just in finance, not just in aviation, but in how we see the value of a human being beyond the surface, beyond assumption, and beyond prejudice. Let me know if you'd like an epilogue, a full SC.